order. Welcome to meeting number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the motion adopted in committee on December 16th, 2021, the committee is meeting today to study the pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2022 budget. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Today's meeting is also taking place in the webinar format. Webinars are for public committee meetings and are available only to members, their staff, and witnesses. Members enter immediately as active participants. All functionalities for active participants remain the same. Staff will be non-active participants and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants of this meeting that screenshots and taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain a 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer at the room entrance. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting and thank members in advance for their cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. The committee agreed that during these hearings, the chair enforces the rule that the response by a witness to a question take no longer than the time taken to ask the question. That being said, I request that members and witnesses mutually treat each other with respect and decorum. If you think the witness has gone beyond the time, it's the member's prerogative to interrupt or ask the next question and to be mindful of other members' time allocation during the meeting. I also request that members not go much over their allotted question time. Though we will not interrupt during a member's allotted time, I'd like to keep you informed that our clerk has 2 clocks to time our members and witnesses. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. From the Canadian Centres for Policy Alternatives, we have Senior Economist David McDonald. Welcome. From the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the Federal Director, Franco Terrazzano. From the C.D. Howe Institute, Senior Fellow Mark Zellmer and Associate Director of Research, Jeremy Cronick. From the Council of Canadian Innovators, we've got Vice President Strategy and Advocacy, Dana O'Born. And from Equiterre, Director of Government Relations, Marc André Viau. And from the Société d'aide au développement des collectivités et Centre d'aide aux entreprises, we have General Manager Pascal Harvey. And my apologies if I mangled the French a little bit there. I tried my best. We're now going to hear opening statements from the witness. Each of the witnesses, one per group, will have up to 5 minutes to make their opening remarks before we move to members' questions And we're going to start from where we started the list, and that's the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And we have Mr. David McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay there? Okay, I'd like to thank the committee for their invitation to speak today. I would refer members to our 2022 alternative federal budget, which lays out in much more detail the items that I'll speak about today and provides you with other costed proposals for your consideration. If COVID-19 in general and Omicron in particular have taught us anything, it's that there will be future waves of this pandemic. The federal government has played a critical role in buffering both households and the provinces from the worst economic impacts of COVID-19. But we need to move to longer-term resiliency against future waves so that we can all resume some sense of normalcy in 2022 and beyond. The healthcare system in particular must be able to withstand future waves. We need a deeper bench in hospitals so future waves can be absorbed without shutting down the rest of the healthcare system. This has to do with capital to some degree with respect to more intensive care beds, but it mostly has to do with staffing, thinking of professions like nurses. Provinces need longer-term commitments to bolster their own systems. This should be through a federal workplace strategy for healthcare workers, but it should also be through a long-term reorientation of healthcare transfers in terms of commitments, federal commitments reaching 35% of total provincial healthcare costs, up from the pre-COVID level of about 23%. I think Budget 2022 needs to keep in mind the atrocious long-term care death rates that we saw in Canada. This has to do certainly with improved pay and more PSWs, but that's only part of it. New national standards are necessary that ensure that seniors' care is universal, public, comprehensive, and portable, and that these be conditions for new federal funding with the provinces. We also need to improve worker supports in Budget 2022. In the January data, I think what we're going to see is the immense impact on workers due to sick leave as workers take time off due to Omicron. Health and the opening of the economy are not in competition. The health of workers is a prerequisite for a properly functioning economy. Now, coverage of the self-employed that did not exist prior to the pandemic through the EI system has been roughly ongoing throughout the pandemic, first via CERB and the CRB, and more currently through the Canadian Worker Lockdown Benefit. These programs have been haphazard, halting, and constantly changing. Looking forward to 2022 and in the budget, I look forward to seeing a more comprehensive plan of how the self-employed can be more fully integrated into the EI system. Longer term, though, the federal government needs to be more involved in the payment of the EI system, particularly once unemployment goes over a certain level. The Canadian system is somewhat unique in that only workers and employers contribute to it. Generally, in other developed countries, governments themselves also contribute to the employment insurance system. That is de facto what has happened over the past two recessions, where the federal government has stepped in to bolster the EI system, but this should be more institutional, where the federal government is constantly contributing to the EI system, not just in times of crisis. This would allow for much needed improvements in the system, like a higher replacement rate or a floor on what the unemployed receive, something like the $500 a week that we saw during the CERB and CRB periods, as well as a lower threshold for hours of entry into the system. Direct transfers to households helps to keep poverty rates in 2022 and 2021, in 2020 and 2021 down. In fact, it's likely that poverty rates were lower than they were in 2019, and we'll see that when the full data comes out. This was in large part due to CERB and the changes to EI, but also to one-time transfers. I think we need to build on that in better insulating, particularly adults, from poverty in Canada through two new programs. One is the Canada Disability Benefit, and the other is the creation of a new Canada Livable Income. Now, the Canada Disability Benefit was initially proposed in the 2020 speech from the throne. Substantial empirical work has been done since that point and into how this could be implemented, the levels that would be needed, and these are mocked up in our alternative budget. We show that the various criteria of benefits, whether they be federal, provincial, or private insurance, for definitions rather for disability, can be unified in a common $11,000 a year benefit, improving the lives of Canadians with disabilities while saving the provinces substantial money. When it comes to a Canada Livable Income, substantial basic incomes already exist in Canada for families with children and for seniors. However, adults in the middle of their age range who don't have high incomes are left out from supports. The one support that they might be able to access, the Canada Workers Benefit, has received several significant changes in recent years. Although it only covers workers with working income, one of the reasons why people live in poverty is because they don't have working income for some reason. So the alternative budget, and I hope the federal budget, will consider a Canada Livable Income that would replace the Canada Workers Benefit, provide coverage for more Canadians, particularly those without working income, and provide a floor of $5,000 a person or $7,000 a couple a year. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. McDonald. And now we'll move to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and Mr. Terrazzano for up to 5 minutes.
Well, my name is Franco Terrazzano. I'm the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We're a nonpartisan advocacy group that's been fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government for more than 30 years. And I would just like to thank you for inviting us to present today. 2070, that's when Canadians can expect to see their next balanced budget under the current trajectory laid out in Budget 2021, and that's according to data published by the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Now, that would add another $2.7 trillion to the debt tab, and taxpayers would lose out on about $3.8 trillion just to pay interest charges on the debt over those 5 decades of deficits. That's trillions of dollars that can't go to hire more nurses, reduce class sizes, or fix potholes. And that's trillions of dollars that can't stay in families' pockets to help with the groceries, or to make sure the kids get to hockey practice, because that money would be going to the bond fund managers through interest payments. Right now, each Canadian's individual share of the debt federally is about $30,000. By 2070, that could reach $67,000. It's a massive debt that we're piling onto the backs of Canadians' kids and Canadians' grandkids. Many families right now are already struggling with inflation and are rightly asking how they're going to pay for this unprecedented amount of government spending. Of course, there's nothing technically stopping the government from balancing its budget long before 2070. But this government is using the cloud of COVID-19 to go on a debt-fueled spending binge. In the last budget, the government plans to increase permanent spending by more than $100 billion by 2026. And that's already on top of spending that had reached all-time highs even before the pandemic. In 2018-19, before the pandemic or any Canada-wide recession, the government spent more money than it did during any single year during World War II. And that's even after accounting for changes in inflation and population growth. In our budget submission, the CTF has outlined a plan to get the balanced budget in 2023-24 by returning program spending to pre-pandemic levels, adjusted upward for inflation and population growth. We are calling on the government to balance the budget by returning to all-time highs levels of spending before the pandemic. So how do we get there? Well, with the massive amount of money that the government has been borrowing for years, finding savings in each department should be like finding water in the ocean. Of course, the government must do the little things right. No more blowing thousands of dollars on sex toy shows in Germany. No more marijuana simulation kits for the military, or spending thousands of dollars on red carpet parties for communication staff. The government must also do the big things right. No more giving 312,000 federal government bureaucrats pay raises during a pandemic and while their neighbors lose their jobs, perhaps their business, and take pay cuts. No more giving businesses like the Ford Motor Corporation $295 million. And we can't keep increasing the blank check the government gives to some premiers by $1 billion every year forever. There must also be leadership at the top. That means ending the pandemic pay raises that MPs and senators continue to gobble up. That also means a governor general shouldn't be able to leave the role early after serving for only about 3 years and still be eligible to collect her pension to age 90, totaling about $4.8 million. And that also means ending the expense account for retired governors general who can expense taxpayers for more than $200,000 every single year for the rest of their life, and including up to 6 months after their death. This government can balance the budget, stop piling on debt onto Canadians' kids and grandkids, reduce the amount of money that we're giving to the bond fund managers on Bay Street, and avoid tax hikes by returning spending to pre-pandemic levels, which were already all-time highs. Now, I assume you're going to hear from hundreds of individuals and groups asking for more money. I am here on behalf of 235,000 Canadian taxpayers across Canada asking for less. And for a little bit of added context, since I've been talking, about $1.3 million more has been added onto the debt. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Terrazzano. And now we'll move to the C.D. Howe Institute and Mr. Zellmer or Mr. Cronick for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We promise that we will combine to well within the 5 minutes. So good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And thank you very much for your kind invitation to join you today. As you'll note from my bio, I have more than 35 years experience in dealing with financial sector policy issues in Canada and abroad. This past year, I helped prepare 3 papers for the C.D. Howe Institute that may be of interest to you in your deliberations. The first one explored modern monetary theory, or MMT. It concluded that MMT overstates the degree of monetary sovereignty that countries like Canada enjoy in a world where capital is mobile. The second paper offered some lessons on how public accountability could be injected into OSFI, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, Supervision of Financial Institutions. The most recent paper discussed the emergence of cryptocurrencies and promoted the introduction of a digital Canadian dollar by the Bank of Canada to support the development of Canadian dollar-linked cryptocurrencies by the private sector. It also argued in favor of having the digital currency issued in token form so that most of the benefits that Canadians currently enjoy with paper money can be retained. Finally, given my past experience, let me note that Canadians and Canadian businesses now stand out for being among the most highly levered in the industrialized world. Why does this matter? Well, I believe the tailwind of falling interest rates and rising asset prices over the past 40 years has helped to contain credit risk in our financial system. But this tailwind has dissipated and may become a headwind going forward. If I am right, then life may become more uncomfortable in the future for our highly levered private sector than conventional credit risk metrics might suggest. This underscores the need to have some flexibility in our public finances to respond to future shocks. Thank you again for the opportunity to meet with you today. I'll be happy to respond to members' questions on these or any other topics. And if I can hand over to Jeremy to finish off our 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So I'll add my thanks to the chair and the committee as well for the invite here today. It's always an honor to be asked. I'm going to touch on 3 topics very briefly and happy to expand on any of them in the Q&A. So I'm going to talk about inflation, housing market, and the proposed bank and insurance tax. So on inflation, it was entirely appropriate for fiscal and monetary authorities to take an aggressive stance when the pandemic first hit. We saw much success in this regard. However, here and around the globe, these stimulative policies have continued long after the recession has ended, and the result, not surprisingly, is inflation well above comfortable levels for inflation targeting central banks. The seemingly coordinated hawkish response of late by developed world central banks might help in taming inflation here at home, but higher interest rates across the global board will slow aggregate global demand, which in turn will hurt domestic economic growth. And this is one of the many problems with inflation. Once it takes hold, it is hard to break, and higher prices disproportionately hurt lower income folks. The second topic is housing. And one idea floated around has been lowering CMHC's mortgage insurance premium to get people over the affordability threshold. And I worry about the precedent that this kind of move has for the relationship between government and crown corporations, whose job, in the case of CMHC, is to set these insurance premiums to ensure stability in our financial system and compensate the public for the risk they bear. So in the name of increased affordability, we're increasing financial stability risk, and this is a difficult trade-off. The crux in the affordability issue is, of course, supply. And here, unfortunately, the federal government is limited in the tools in its toolbox. What it can do is focus on what prods it can use to encourage lower levels of government to improve their approval processes, their rules around density, and the way they charge development fees. Lastly, I'll just mention a quick discussion on the bank and insurance tax. Taxes should, of course, be progressive, in which this one is meant to be. But in our environment in Canada, banks and insurance companies will pass down this cost to consumers, to employees, and to investors in the form of higher fees, insurance premiums, lower deposit rates, et cetera. Now, if the Canadian financial sector was more competitive, some other competitor would come along and offer a better deal to customers, upending the incumbents. However, in our highly regulated sector, despite good competition from credit unions, it's unlikely to come to pass, meaning that more needs to be done to continue to improve competitiveness in this sector, which is a better way to tax any excess profits. Moving forward with open banking and implementing the recommendations that came out of the advisory committee in open banking should be at the top of the list, as this is a zero cost way of improving productivity. So I'll stop here. I'll thank the members of the committee again for the invite, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Mr. Cronick, Mr. Zellmer. We are moving now to the Council of Canadian Innovators, and we have Ms. Dana O'Bourne with us.
Hello, good afternoon,
Hi.
Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Lots of nodding heads. Good. I'm getting used to that on Zoom. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today and talk about the importance of Budget 2022. I know there's a lot of content to get through. I'm appearing on behalf of the Council of Canadian Innovators, and we are a national business council representing 150 of Canada's headquartered, fastest growing tech companies. Our members are headquartered, as I mentioned, here in Canada and employ north of 52,000 employees across the country. We're market leaders in the sectors of healthcare, clean tech, financial technologies, cybersecurity, and more. And addressing Canada's post-pandemic talent crisis and improving Canada's innovation outputs in research, development, and commercialization are the two priorities from our pre-budget submission that I will speak to today. So first, I'd like to brief you on the pressures facing domestic technology companies. And this talent issue is pervasive, I think, probably across all sectors, but specifically for the tech sector today, in their pursuit of attracting and retaining highly skilled talent to fuel the growth of their companies. So from governments to business and community organizations, so many of us have embraced new digital tools in the past 2 years. Today, more than ever, Canadians shop, bank, study, and connect online. And this increased demand for digital services actually helped fuel an economic rebound in the ICT space after the dark early months of the pandemic. A recent report from the ICTC estimated that by 2025, Canada's digital economy will employ 2.26 million Canadians. That's 11% of all employment in the country. But this will require an additional 250,000 jobs to be created over the next 3 years. Good news, CCI's members and the Canadian scale-up companies are committed to creating many of those new jobs, but they face a serious talent supply issue. Nearly every conversation that I have with our members tends to deal with workforce issues in some way. So scale-up companies can't just maintain their workforce, they actually need to grow it and grow it rapidly. Adding the best and the brightest talent remains a constant priority. Further, a recent survey of our membership found that most companies plan to increase their workforce by 20% this year. That's an additional 10,000 more workers added to our workforce in Canada by this year's end. For years, the shortage of skilled talent has been a driving concern for the council, but the recent shift to remote work has only exacerbated this problem. Canada's skilled workers are now part of a global labor market where geography is no longer important, and our domestic innovators are finding themselves in fierce competition with global companies who can offer significantly higher salaries for the same crop of high-skilled workers. This is driving up wage inflation across our companies, with some finding that wage expectations have increased by 25% in the last year. To meet the talent needs of our country's fastest growing companies, we need to increase the generation, attraction, retention of skilled workers for Canadian firms. We've got many recommendations on how to address these challenges, including improvements to our immigration system and investments into upskilling and retraining programs. And I look forward to engaging with you on these ideas today. I'd also like to bring to your attention Canada's SHRED program and its need for reform to help spur innovation and generate a greater return on investment for Canada. This tax credit is the cornerstone of Canada's innovation funding, and it's used by overwhelming majority of CCI members and more. We have been calling for SHRED reform for years. During last year's federal election, we were encouraged to see that leading political parties heard our calls and included plans to reform SHRED in their platforms. But we continue to be concerned that as the government promotes an innovation agenda, the SHRED program does not allow costs related to the development and protection of IP to be eligible for the tax credit. Intellectual property is arguably the most valuable commodity in the innovation economy, and SHRED badly lacks an IP focus. In our budget submission, we also asked the government to stop giving SHRED incentives to foreign companies who take their IP outside of Canada. The SHRED tax incentive, and particularly the refundable portion, delivers material long-term value to Canada only if the IP flowing from the investment stays here. Without an IP strategy for SHRED, Canada is doing philanthropy, not innovation. We also need to see other tools to protect ideas as they commercialize, such as patent boxes, be deployed. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and present on behalf of our innovators. And I do hope you'll take the time to read CCI's full budget submission. I also urge you to get to know the innovative companies in your own ridings. And I've checked many of yours, and they do exist there, and understand the challenges that are facing them in their pursuit of scale. Without a strong base of these homegrown high growth companies in Canada, we will not be able to generate the economic growth and public wealth necessary to pay for the public services that Canadians depend on. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Ms. Oborn, and we look forward to asking you questions. We are moving now to Équiterre, and we have Monsieur Marc-André Villot.
Parfait, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Finance Committee, thank you for having us here today. My name is Marc-André Villot. I'm Director of Government Relations at Équiterre. We are an environmental NGO with over 150,000 members and supporters. We're active in the areas of agriculture, light and heavy transportation, consumer affairs, energy, and climate change in general. Last August, a pre-budget consultation submission was made with a focus on agriculture, energy, and mobility. So I'm going to present those recommendations, and some of them have been updated. Climate change is affecting Canadian production, resources, and crops. Last summer's drought resulted in shortages of feed supplies and lower yields for canola and wheat. As they say, bad things come in clusters. So after the fires, we had flooding, especially on the Abbotsford agricultural plains. Damage associated with flooding in British Columbia is estimated at $450 million. We therefore welcome the new directions from the federal and provincial and territorial governments, both in the Guelph Statement and the Minister of Agriculture's mandate letter. Climate risk management figures prominently. We want to see the government invest in solutions that will allow farmers to adapt to better manage climate risks while using agriculture as a tool to fight climate change. And we believe that investment in soil health is needed to realize the full potential of carbon sequestration and ensure the resilience of our agri-food sector. In this context, we're calling for a dedicated climate risk management program, and we also recommend funding for a pan-Canadian strategy for a study of best practices in soil health. I'll turn now from climate impacts in agriculture to energy issues. We know that fossil fuels are the main cause of climate change, and that after years of promises, the subsidies are expected to end by 2023, but we're concerned that there might be new subsidies. Like more than 400 experts, we are concerned that a possible investment tax credit proposed for carbon capture, utilization, and storage could undermine our efforts to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. We know that carbon capture technologies are neither economically viable nor proven on a large scale, with a poor environmental record and limited potential. If the industry wants to develop this sector, that's fine, but taxpayers are already saddled with the bill for orphaned wells. We therefore recommend that the government publish its roadmap for phasing out fossil fuel subsidies in the next budget framework and avoid subsidizing carbon capture. All this obviously goes hand in hand with the adoption of legislation and a fair transition plan. After all, there will be no transition without workers and communities. Now, turning to mobility, things are moving fast. In 2021, Canada moved up the ban on the sale of new gasoline vehicles to 2035. The problem is that ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles, account for only 5% of new vehicle sales, and light trucks have reached 81% of sales. So that means more GHG emissions. We know that in Quebec and that we have this a transition that is happening, but we need a standard. Our organization believes that buyer incentive programs have reached maturity and are not sustainable to fund the replacement of millions of vehicles. And in fact, the goal shouldn't be to replace every vehicle because electrification must be accompanied by a modal shift to active, collective, and shared use. Since we're feeling generous, we have an idea for the government to save money and reduce GHGs in one program. The time has come to transition to a self-financing bonus and penalty program so that a portion of the sale of polluting vehicles contributes to financial incentives for the purchase of EVs. This would require changing the green levy program to make it proportional to vehicle fuel efficiency. And this would allow the program to replenish the coffers for the incentive program. In closing, I would like to remind you that Section 23 of the Climate Change Transparency and Accountability Act places obligations on the Minister of Finance and requires the Minister to work with the Minister of the Environment to prepare an annual report on the key actions taken by the Government of Canada to manage its financial risks and opportunities related to climate change. We recommend that the Minister of Finance undertake this accountability exercise starting with the 2022 budget. So thank you. I will be available to answer any questions you have during the discussion period. Thank you, Mr. Viau.
To the Société au développement des collectivités et Centre d'aide aux entreprises. And Monsieur Pascal Hadvet for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee and other speakers. I'm very pleased to speak to you today on behalf of the CFDC network and the BDCs, that is the Community Futures Development Corporations and the Business Development Centers. So these are not-for-profit organizations that have been active for the past 40 years. We have over 1,000 professionals and volunteers, and 57 of the CFDCs and 10 BDCs. I want to mention that this is part of a Canada-wide network of over 260 organizations in all parts of Canada. So this network is very active in rural and semi-urban areas across Canada, but I really want to talk about the Quebec context and recovery, economic recovery that we are working to promote. We work with the Quebec Economic Development Agency on behalf of the Government of Canada to help our communities and our businesses in our rural and semi-urban areas. Over the past year, our members have dealt with over $128 million in funding for a huge number of organizations, and we have provided a great impetus for local economic development. The CFDCs have worked hard and done very good work. We hope to be part of the green recovery. I want to talk a little bit about what we do in practice. Every year, we provide assistance and funding for over 10,000 businesses and 1,000 local projects. Many of them are involved in sustainable development. So we provide funding and help with sustainable development activities. We also have a lot of involvement in municipal projects and local development activities. We also provide assistance for agri-food sectorial development. It would be good if the government, through the finance department, could promote decentralization toward the organizations that I represent. They work on the ground. That is our strength, this grassroots connection. We have direct connections with entrepreneurs, and we are their primary connection. We work very locally, and that really is what makes us a very good organization. Thank you.
Monsieur Had.
Thank you, Mr. Alfie.
We're now moving to we're moving to our rounds of questions. Our first round will give each party up to 6 minutes for questions. We are starting with the Conservatives, and Mr. McLean, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me thank all the witnesses we have here today, because in the short time you were able to present to us, you gave us a whole bunch of information, and I think a lot of it's going to be very useful. I'm going to start my questions here to Franco Terrazzano, Mr. Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you very much for what you do, what you bring to the table here. I tell you, I've been in Ottawa for 2 years, and often at all these committee hearings, we hear what we call rent seekers coming in and telling us how you need to fund us more through government. These are our programs, you need to fund us, without giving us the other side of the equation and without any consideration for who's paying the bill at the end of the day. It's Canadian taxpayers that are paying the bill. So thank you for your work. Thank you for making sure you're here at these pre-budget consultations. Let's talk about the debt to GDP ratio. And that debt to GDP ratio has gone from 30%, which we were trying to keep it at a level at, to 50%. And now the government proposes to keep it at that 50% level, even though our GDP is increasing. Can you comment on that quickly, please?
Apologies. Thank you for the question, member. It's an absolutely staggering amount. And I think what's so eye-watering is not just where the debt is now, but where the debt is going under current projections laid out in the last budget. I mentioned the PBO. Well, I think many Canadians are rightly very concerned about the financial burden that they are leaving to future generations. Right now, debt per person is about $30,000. Under current projections over the next 5 decades, that could be all the way up to $67,000. Many people worried about the financial tab that they're leaving to their kids and grandkids. And I think that's something the government needs to take serious.
Thank you. I want to go into that further because I had to answer or had to ask a question in the House of Commons yesterday, and one of my colleagues across the aisle talked about the debt to GDP ratio. GDP is a national figure. It counts everything we do. Debt, the way the Government of Canada calculates it, is a federal number only, and yet all that GDP is also provincial. So it's not, we can't double count the GDP. Can you tell us what the debt to GDP ratio really is when you count in the provincial debt across the country?
Well, it is true that gross debt is much higher than net debt. Now, one thing that I want to bring up, member, with respect, is that I talked about these projections of 5 decades of deficits. Now, that is startling in and of itself, but the PBO also estimates their data that it would take another at least 2 decades to finally pay off that debt. So I think many taxpayers that are currently living are wondering if they'll ever live to see a debt-free Canada. And even more startling is the fact that the PBO assumes relatively low interest rates. It assumes a steady upward march of economic growth. So I think we should all be concerned what happens if interest rates tick up, and what happens if we stumble into another downturn unrelated to the pandemic.
Well, thank you again. Music to my ears when you talked about returning to balanced budgets in 2023, 2024. This country needs to get back to balance. Stop spending the dollars that our children and our grandchildren and their children are going to have to pay for the programs that we're incurring here now. Because we're all going to have problems, and you talk about the systemic problems that are going to emerge in society. There is going to be payments to be made in the future. I want to talk about the $560 billion that went out the door since the pandemic. as the parliamentary budget officer indicated, 170 billion of that was discretionary spending, nothing to do with the pandemic. Is that something we can move backwards on very quickly in order to get back to a balance?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to remember, and this is what I noted also in the full budget submission, is that you could balance the federal budget in 2023-24 simply by going back to spending a few years ago, pre-pandemic, which was already all-time highs. So in 2018-19, you had the federal government spending more than no Canada-wide recession than it did during any single year during World War II. One of the other concerns that we're hearing from so many Canadians, of course, is inflation, especially when you have the Bank of Canada, which the printing press has been on overdrive, $370 billion printed out of thin air. And of course, the more dollars that the Bank of Canada buys, the less that our dollars in our savings account and our retirement account can purchase. And a large chunk of what the Bank of Canada has been printing up is Government of Canada debt. So it sure seems like Ottawa is financing a good chunk of its deficits by using the printing press.
Yes, of course, and thank you for that, how we're financing it. And there will be problems with that, as we know, going forward. My final question for you, Mr. Terrazzano, is can you explain the dichotomy of what we've gone through here as far as public sector payments versus private sector debt that's been incurred during this pandemic? That is, the public sectors continue to grow their expenses significantly, and the private sector has borne the entire burden of everything that's happened in this pandemic, including lockdowns, including cutbacks, including unemployment. Can I get your comment on that, please?
It's unfortunate to say this, but we're not all in this together. We've seen the private sector, so many people lose their jobs, take a pay cut, maybe even lose their small business, but we've seen no restraint from the federal government actually spending more on everything forever. We've seen more than 312,000 federal government employees receive a pay raise while their neighbors in the private sector struggle. We've seen more government employees. We still have less jobs in the private sector than pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. You got about 5 seconds. So we're going to move to the Liberals and Madame Chatel for 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say that, I'm very proud that with the fiscal prudence and good management of this government through the pandemic, we have one of the best net debt per GDP for the whole G20 countries. So something to be very proud of in this crisis and this pandemic. So, mes questions.
My questions will be mainly for Mr. Harvey. I really enjoyed your introduction, Mr. Harvey. I agree with you that Canada is at the dawn of a major economic change and transition. In this economic transition, there will be winners and losers. Those who are well prepared will be the winners of this transition. And one of the concerns, and you put your finger on it, is are our small communities in rural areas or semi-urban areas ready? I represent a large riding. So in your opinion, what are the best tools to ensure that we'll be there for these communities at the dawn of this transition so that they're well positioned in tomorrow's economy? Ms. Chatel, I'd like to tell you that our organizations are the best tools. We take care of rural regions and larger isolated regions because that's in our DNA. It's in our mandate, too, that the federal government helps us to take care of these communities, take care of companies, too, because the creators of wealth are entrepreneurs. They are the ones who have experienced the pandemic with great difficulty. And I think that we need to use the proactivity of this community and the reflexes deployed during the pandemic, short-circuiting methods to increase consumption so that entrepreneurs can have new clienteles and new practices in their day-to-day operations. So for many years now, our organization, our network, has had a Sustainable Development Exchange Group, there's been good proactivity by our members. There are about 40 out of 67 that are working within that working group. That has allowed us to be very active in the spheres of activity I named earlier, among others. Synergy, industrial symbiosis that allows companies to get together to develop new types of clienteles and be ready to face new types of pandemics, unfortunately, because catastrophes are something we'll see more of. This is not the last one. But we have to learn from our mistakes. We have to change our ways of doing things and our ways of consuming, especially. I think that we in our organizations are well-tooled, and our proximity to these communities make us frontline actors in this. I was listening to Dana as well. Innovation's very important. We'll see those who are winners in our economy, and those are the ones who will prepare for the digitization of our economy, for innovation, green technology, robotization. I get the impression that we have a historic moment here where we have to position ourselves properly. How can we bring innovation to our regions? Is this through what we call innovation centers that have to be created? And if so, how do we create them? How do we support our regions so that they can discover what will bring them economic success in tomorrow's economy?
I think it's really important just to consider that, first of all, there are some thriving centers of tech across the country. I mean, 6 months ago, nobody would have thought that Alberta would have been such a tech hub, and there's a lot of tech activity also happening in your home province as well. I think if the idea is to create new structures, maybe adjacent to the superclusters program, or I guess even in thinking about what the new CARPA program will look like, it's going to be really critical to understand what those investments look like for companies and making sure that they're serving the local domestic ecosystem. And I talked a little bit about research and development tax credits in my deputation, and our budget submission also spends a lot of time talking about creating what we like to call marketplace frameworks. That includes the right standards and regulations to ensure that the wealth is staying here in Canada and servicing Canadians. That means that ideas that are generated are not picked off and taken out of Canada, and that's protected through tools like a patent box or through the Innovation Asset Collective that the government has already established, all to protect IP. And a lot of that really has to be done in concert with Canadian technology companies. So great question. But the planning of some of these structures, I think, really just needs to be very strategic, especially if we're competing on a global landscape with countries like China and Israel and the US.
Merci, Madame Chatel.
Thank you, Ms. Chatel.
The block, and Monsieur Saint-Marie for
Mr. Saint-Marie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I salute all the witnesses. Thank you for your very interesting presentations. Mr. Harvey, I can tell you that your organizations are very well implemented in our communities. There's one in Matawini and Joliette in my riding. They make a big difference, so my hat's off to you. My questions are for Mr. Viau of Équiterre. Thank you for your presentation and your brief from last August. As you said, there have been some additions since then. I look at your presentation the other way, talking about climate responsibility. So there was the adoption of C12. So the government has responsibilities when it comes to climate. Now, could you explain that and what you're asking the government to do? Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie. A brief comment first. Our colleague, Mr. McLean, talked about witnesses as rent seekers. I'd like to point out that I came here with only one recommendation requesting money. The other one was eliminating subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. But I'd be pleased to work with him on this. Now, with regard to your question more specifically, in the bill that was adopted on carbon neutrality, there's clause 3 that says that in cooperation with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Environment, there has to be an annual report made public about the major measures to examine the financial aspects of climate change. So what we're asking is that that clause be applied as early as when the budget is tabled, and that the parameters be defined. So that's a very good responsibility that was included, but we don't have all the parameters about what will be reported when it comes to climate accountability, and we need that because we need to see how the different departments and agencies of the federal government will support the objectives of reducing greenhouse gases that are supposed to be 45%. Okay, thank you. That wasn't in last fall's economic update, and you're asking us to have that in the budget. That's quite clear. Now, when it comes to mobility, you're suggesting something that's neutral, that there be a tax on more polluting vehicles that would support less polluting vehicles. You said the subsidy for EVs had achieved that, so I'd like to hear you about that. Thank you. Well, what we've noticed, Mr. Saint-Marie, is that we saw this in the first phase of the deployment of this subsidy program, which was an important one, to get people's interested in electric vehicles. Now, if we want to have a complete change and have personal vehicles be electric, after the first draft, we saw that the envelope was empty after a 3-year period. Now it's 5% of vehicles sold. If we want 100%, and that's what we're recommending, because we're recommending limited this auto pact for it's not responsible. We see the congestion on our roads. So the government shouldn't be paying anymore. It should be the buyers of polluting vehicles, and there should be incentives for those who buy EVs until there's parity. And then we can see the various incentives eliminated. Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. When it comes to energy, you say eliminating subsidies to fossil fuels. And there's also the capture and stocking. It doesn't seem to be a very promising avenue, so there shouldn't be public funds to support that. Well, previous witnesses talked about innovation. If the industry wants to get involved in that kind of research and do some development and innovation on this front, we have nothing against that. What we're saying is that taxpayers should not pay for those technologies. We're already paying very high environmental costs for the production of fossil fuels and its use. We're paying the bill for the cleanup of orphan wells. So we already have a very high tab. We shouldn't add another burden. It should be on the shoulders of the industry. These are unproven technologies that have not been proven effective. Worldwide, we're talking about 0.1% of emissions that are captured. 80% of the projects attempted in the U.S. have been abandoned. So let's say that the success rate is not really impressive. But there are other avenues we could explore. Thank you. Have you examined the question of hydrogen? Is that promising or not? Well, we did come out about that. We are in favor of green hydrogen, and we agree with deploying this, but as long as it's not a question of developing fossil fuels.
And Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. To Mr. McDonald from the CCPA, I know in your alternative budget, you're recommending the establishment of a Canada Livable Income Program and a Canada Disability Benefit. I just wondered if you might be able to speak to, some of the ongoing challenges as Canadians try to find work and get enough hours in pandemic-affected industries, and some of the cracks that folks have fallen through, particularly since the Liberals made access to pandemic benefits much harder, and how the establishment of benefits like this would help with that, both now in the pandemic context, but also as we look down the road towards economic disruption as a result of climate change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blakey, for the question. Certainly when it comes to coverage of workers in the Omicron wave, but in future waves, this isn't necessarily the federal government's fault, but there is this ongoing problem of paid sick leave, particularly for low-income workers. This is not just generally provincial policy. The federal benefit, the CRSB, has been a failure, frankly, because the take-up rates have been so low. That wasn't really the best approach. I mean, the best approach is to have this legislated provincially. But I think the federal government could certainly do more to push for these type of sickness benefits being incorporated within provincial labor law, such that low-income workers have access to them, whether they have COVID-19 or any other illness. Certainly when it comes to the coverage of self-employed workers, what's interesting is that the best coverage they had was at the very start of the pandemic, and the coverage has gotten progressively worse over the course of 2020 and 2021. The sequence of events started with the CERB, which was very easy to access for both people who were eligible for EI and those who were self-employed but weren't eligible for EI. Those benefits were capped under the CRB and limited to $300 a week. Those ended at the end of October, and then we saw the creation of the lockdown benefit, which seemed like it wasn't a real benefit until lockdowns happened again. And then all of a sudden we had to put the websites together. It seems like the federal government wasn't prepared. This is a benefit that is and will be accessed by self-employed people who don't have eligibility under the EI system. I mean, there does appear to be a commitment to include self-employed workers within the EI system by January, essentially by this time next year. I look forward to those details, and those consultations are ongoing. That certainly was one of the big lessons of COVID-19, was the lack of coverage for self-employed workers. Many of them are part of the gig economy, and part of the problem is just straight misclassification, a problem that could be rapidly addressed by the federal government, which is to say workers that it looks like they're self-employed, but they really don't have choice in terms of what they're taking. Think of an Uber driver, that they be correctly classified as employees, and that the employer contributes, to the EI fund. That would be something that could be rapidly addressed. There are certainly employees who are self-employed, legitimately self-employed, and are not presently covered by EI, and hopefully changes in the EI system that we'll see over the course of this year will help to address that.
Monsieur Viau, nous avons entendu parler du...
Mr. Viau, we heard about the need to have a much more ambitious program from the federal government on green technologies to promote innovation on residential and commercial buildings too. Is this something that Équiterre supports? And what do you think the federal government should do in terms of budgeting to have a program to support this? Well, I'm not very well placed, not as much as my colleagues. There's the Coalition for a Green Budget, but we are part of that coalition, but we're not responsible for the residential sector. We are in solidarity with the demands that have been made by the coalition. The importance of eco-energy renovation needs no further demonstration. We know that we need this for renovations, but for new buildings as well. We have to ensure that they're energy efficient. What I would perhaps add is in link with mobility. That is to ensure that we can deploy the research necessary for buildings so that there be electric charging stations. And that includes not only residential buildings, but also Crown Corporation buildings like Canada Post, for instance, in eastern Montreal. They are building a new centre without any electric vehicle stations for electric trucks or for their employees' vehicles. So that is one example. Are you talking about assistance only for plug and play for Canadians, or more of a public infrastructure? And what the federal government could do to support the development of a green budget? I don't really have the figures here for that kind of development, but I know that there is a plan that could connect all communities. Thank you.
Up members to our second round, and we have the Conservatives up for 5 minutes, and Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is to the C.D. Howe Institute, either Mark Zelmer or Jeremy Cronick. The C.D. Howe published their annual report card for federal, provincial, and territories this past year. A report card that saw my home province of New Brunswick receive an A- grade, along with Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, and Nunavut. This same report card gave our federal government an F grade. Can either Mr. Zelmer or Mr. Cronick explain to me how the federal government, with the answer key, can still receive a failing grade?
Well, so I mean, each CDO Institute paper is published by an individual. So I didn't. Neither Mark or I wrote that paper. But the fiscal accountability papers, in general, are based on a series of measures, a variety of measures, transparency, how close you stick to what you say you were going to do, and things of that nature. And so that based on those series of rankings, that's how the authors of those papers do that for the federal government, for the provinces, and they do it for the municipalities as well. But neither Mark or I wrote that paper.
I respect that. Is there anything in that report that you found particularly alarming?
Well, I think you always find it alarming when anyone's ranked at the bottom, when some of the issues are around transparency.
And it seems, I mean, the provinces tabled a report and the federal government didn't, which lacks accountability. Mr. Zelmer, would you say that holding public officials accountable for their spending, taxing, and borrowing is fundamental in our roles as parliamentarians?
I certainly would. In general, I think given the amount of money that we as a population entrust to our elected officials at whatever level of government, we as a population are entitled to have an accounting as to how it's being spent and an understanding of the reasons for which they chose to make the choices that they did. So yes, I think we expect that increasingly of the private sector, and I think the public sector should lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you for that. How do you feel the current government is doing with respect to its spending and the accountability that the public has in that spending?
I personally am not an expert in this area, so I don't think I can give you a very well-informed opinion. I'll ask Jeremy if he can, but I certainly cannot.
Yeah, again, I mean, so I think the focus continues to be on that paper, which neither of us wrote. But I mean, to answer your question, obviously there was a budget that was tabled last year, and so that would have changed markedly the rankings, because not having one certainly affected the ones you're discussing. So, certainly you're moving in the direction when you table a budget. Now, once you get in, that's what we're here to do today, is to discuss some of the measures that'll make it into, this coming budget.
What advice can you give the committee when it comes to government being more financially transparent? Do you have any advice for the current government on how they could improve financial transparency?
Well, one suggestion I would put on the table is that as much as possible, they should be accountable not only for what's going directly through their budget, but also be willing to explain on a more consolidated basis what's happening with respect to crown corporations and other vehicles that exist, if you like, outside of the main budget. We do have senior public officials that are accountable for those institutions, but I think talking about how things are happening on a consolidated basis would be important. And I think also being accountable for and talking about some of the contingent liabilities that could exist for the government down the road and how they propose to manage the risks around that would be helpful.
Mr. Stewart, if I could just add one quick point to that, around misses, right? So if you're missing, certain targets that you yourself had put in place in the budget, an explanation when you do your updates as to why that's happening. I mean, obviously COVID threw, a lot of the projections, at least with the budget that predated it, threw it off course quite considerably. So then the key there is to communicate with the public where those misses happened and why.
That's your time, Mr. Stewart. Thank you very much. We're moving to the Liberals and Ms. Zarowitz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for their excellent testimony today. And I want to thank Mr. Zellmer and Mr. Kronik. Your last two recommendations I thought were excellent. So it's on our record, and I really appreciate those comments. I think that we could always be more transparent and more accountable, and I think they were both very helpful. I have tons of questions and very little time, so let me try to get to them. I'm going to start off with the Council of Canadian Innovators. Ms. O'Bourne, I heard you had indicated that you have some recommendations around immigration and training. Are they in the report that you've submitted in your brief to the Finance Committee?
They are indeed.
Okay, so I won't have you repeat it just because too much to go through. And I also appreciated your recommendations around how to improve SHRED, the need to adjust the to ensure that we are developing and protecting IP, as well as making sure that we give money to companies that are not taking our IP out of the country, that they actually sort of remain here in our country. So I heard that loud and clear. Very much appreciate that. And I'm assuming that's also in the report that you have submitted to us. Now, there are many who feel that we do not have a culture of patenting or IP protection in this country. And I know that you've made some recommendations around SHRED. Are there any other recommendations you would make around creating that culture of IP generation, retention, and education?
Certainly. A few of those are in our report, so happy to follow up with that as well. I did in my deputation make a reference to what is called a patent box, which is actually a tax treatment to how patents are basically taxed in Canada. And so as you can imagine, it's basically putting a little bit of a fence around an idea. That's what a patent does in its simplest form, and making sure that people don't steal those ideas and generate them from wealth in different parts of the world. And so the use of a patent box and some more notes on that, I can certainly follow up with the committee on, would be a great tool. The government has already taken a few steps. The initiation of the Innovation Asset Collective under ISED has been a great step in the right direction. But I think we also need to think about making use of protecting some of the new technologies that have come out of the pandemic. I think the government, provincially, federally, municipally, I know those are not your domains, federally it is, have put a lot of investment into health technology. How do we make sure that that stays in Canada and services Canadians? So looking at some of that research and development at NRCan, NRC IRAP, and some of the other investments that are being made through the Strategic Innovation Fund, when we put those investments out into the ecosystem to try and generate business and growth, it's important also to keep tabs on how those ideas are being commercialized to make sure that they're benefiting Canada.
Thank you. And then I'm going to now shift over to Mr. Cronick. Mr. Cronick, you've made a number of excellent recommendations. One around housing, you talked about there's some limited tools at the national level. And then you went in to say that there are some things we can do, like incentivize, as we're giving dollars around housing, and incentivize the lower levels of government, tax reduced development fees. And I forgot what else you said. If you could just repeat that, just because when I heard, I thought, oh, these are excellent. I'd like to record them.
Right. So what I said was the federal government can prod lower levels government in areas of the approval process, the rules around density, and the way that they charge development fees. And I can expand on those if you'd like.
What I'd appreciate is if you could actually send us an email on that, because then we can incorporate as part of our recommendations. The other thing I wouldn't mind you talking for the last sort of little bit that I have is open banking. Mm-hmm. You indicated that it's a zero cost way for us to improve productivity. Would you mind elaborating on that further, please?
Well, so I mean, it's not zero. I should have probably been more careful with my wording around zero cost, but it's productivity enhancing at minimal cost, at least, in the sense that you are letting the private sector do the work. You have all these fintechs that would benefit immensely from access to the data that they would get through us sort of putting open banking into play. I mean, some of this stuff is already happening, but the advisory committee gave some recommendations, quite specific recommendations on what's needed to get open banking off the ground, and there hasn't been much movement on that. And I think to the extent that there would be, the idea there is that those fintech players would be able to provide at a lower cost to consumers some of the banking services, investment services, et cetera, that they're not currently getting, or that they're getting for a much higher cost with the incumbents, right? So it's not zero cost, but certainly it's not the kind of thing where the government has to run the program and therefore spend billions and billions of dollars to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arowitz. And now we're moving to the block, Monsieur Saint-Marie, for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. Mr. Viau, you talked about agriculture and health, science health, in connection with climate change. I only have 2.5 minutes, so I would just like you to elaborate a little bit on that, please. Very well.
Sorry, I did not hear. I heard the chair called out, but I did not hear
just a point of order. I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but the French and English translation on my side was the same volume. I don't know if that's unique to me or if other people were having the same.
I look around the room. I was hearing okay. Everybody else? Okay.
All right, I'll adjust my setup, I guess. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Continue, please.
C'est bon, je peux y aller?
I can go ahead then. Thank you. Yes. So what we are calling for, among other things, is as Équiterre, on behalf of our organization, and also as a member of the Green Budget Coalition, is to make sure that we have good soil health, because soils are one of the tools to combat climate change and also to increase the resilience of our agri-food system, because the more carbon is sequestered in our soils and used for production, the less we have to use inputs that are not natural, for example, nitrogen fertilizers. It's a tool that we can use to adapt, but it also encourages best practices to promote production and sequester carbon. So what we are calling for is $50 million to test health soil health practices, $6 million for a strategy on healthy soils over 3 years, $2 million for an information exchange system, $3 million over 2 years for soil health analysis. And we've also added in training programs and hiring for new advisors on regenerative practices, and those are the recommendations we're making. Thank you. Thank you.
Stoppage time. We are moving now to the NDP. Mr. Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. The alternative federal budget by the CCPA talks about the need to create hundreds of thousands of new affordable non-market housing units, as well as a number of other measures having to do with housing, but including an acquisition fund to help nonprofits be able to, secure assets, whether it's existing buildings or land, in order to be able to compete in the current market. I'm just wondering if you can talk. I think it's pretty clear from a moral point of view why this is necessary. I'm hoping you could speak to some of the economic benefits and some of the salutary effects that moving forward with these things might have on the situation in the current housing market.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. There's really two sides to this. One has been the increasing activity of real estate investment trusts buying up traditional purpose-built housing with the goal of maximizing profits from those assets, as opposed to maintaining tenants in those apartment buildings for long periods of time. And this is a change from the traditional ownership structure that you'd see in purpose-built housing from smaller, more local enterprises that might be focused on steady streams of income versus larger profit-oriented publicly listed companies whose goal is to extract as much profit as possible from tenants. So on the one side, I think that it's important to eliminate the tax preference for real estate investment trusts, which is one of the reasons why they've gained so much prominence. But the other side is to put co-ops and nonprofits on equal footing for their ability to purchase purpose-built housing and to retain it, not for the profit of investors, but for a livable place for tenants, likely lower income tenants, to live, often in downtown cores.
Sorry, I was muted there. Can you take the time remaining just to spell out a little bit more some of the recommendations the CCPA has in respect of housing?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the land and existing acquisition fund, so we're recommending a $340 million a year fund. This would actually be offset by the removal, it would be partially offset by the removal of the real estate investment trust tax preference, which allows for the pass-through of profits so that investors can then deduct them on their side, often not because they're in RRSPs. And so this trade, in essence, would shift the balance of power to some degree back towards nonprofits. I think the other thing to mention, of course, is that there has been a fair amount of recent attention on the National Housing Strategy and the fact that it does appear to be funding many at market units, in essence. Its definition of affordable is extremely generous, and many projects that were just going to go ahead on the private side are being funded in any event. And some of the structures within the NHS make it actually more difficult for nonprofits and co-ops to gain access to the funds. Anyway, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Blakey. We are moving to the Conservatives. We have Mr. Patzer. Welcome, Mr. Patzer.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's an honor to be able to join this committee today. My questions are going to be for Mr. Terrazzano. In Bill C-8, which is an act to implement certain provisions of the economic and fiscal update, there's a provision to the Income Tax Act to introduce a new refundable tax credit to return fuel charge proceeds to farming businesses in backstop jurisdictions. I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to look at that, what your thoughts are on that system, and if it's essential to have in place.
I have not seen that specific proposal, but I mean, we do hear from a lot of farmers, a lot of businesses that the additional taxes, carbon taxes, fuel taxes are really a pain. We've put out analysis that shows, depending on the province, between 31 to 42% of the pump price comes through taxes. So one thing we would like to see is some tax relief during the pandemic. We've seen a number of other countries around the world. We've seen Spain, France, they're reducing electricity taxes. We've seen South Korea reduce their gas tax by 20%. So we've seen other countries provide their citizens with relief, but unfortunately, we've seen Ottawa stick their constituents with a higher tax bill.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's supposed to only increase on April 1st, and no, it's not an April Fool's joke. Do farmers actually get back more than they pay in carbon taxes in Canada?
Well, you know, I've heard that thrown around sometimes, but it's really magic math to think that the government is going to hammer us with a tax, then somehow make people better off. The truth of the matter is that the carbon tax is causing a ton of pain. So are booze taxes, which continue to go up. So are payroll taxes, which continue to go up. The first rule of government during a pandemic should be first, do no harm. But as you mentioned, the carbon tax is set to increase for the third time during the pandemic. It's supposed to continue to go up all the way to 2030 to where it's nearly 40 cents per liter. Also, we have a second carbon tax coming in through fuel regulations. And you mentioned a rebate, but as far as I'm aware, there is absolutely no rebate with the second carbon tax, which could add another 11 cents per liter to the price of gasoline.
Unbelievable. One of your recommendations that you have for the government is to end the gun ban and buyback program. I'm just wondering if you had a chance to do a fiscal analysis on that and what you actually are projecting that's going to cost the taxpayer on what a buyback program is going to look like.
Well, thank you for that question, member. So the Parliamentary Budget Officer has done a partial analysis, and it could cost $756 million, but that's just a partial cost. That's only to reimburse the gun owners. We have seen analysis done by a professor at Simon Fraser University who says that, well, the biggest cost hasn't even been factored in, and that's administration, that's staffing, which could add billions of dollars onto the price tag. And not only is it going to be expensive, but we've heard from the officers who are charged with protecting us on the front lines, the largest police union in Canada. I just like to read a quote. The NPF said that the gun grab, it's not going to address, quote, current and emerging themes or urgent threats to public safety. And even worse, the gun grab and buyback could make Canada less safe because it's diverting resources from actually cracking down on crime to targeting law-abiding Canadian citizens.
One other recommendation that you have that is of particular interest to me, because I hear about it on a daily basis from my constituents, is to phase out equalization. I would just like you to comment on that one further.
That's correct. We have a 20. Apologies, I'm getting noise. We have a 20-year plan to phase out equalization over those 20 years. Next year, some provinces would still get $19 billion. But one of the key concerns, I'm from Calgary. That's where I lived over the last few years. It's just so unfair. I mean, really, how many more Albertans need to lose their job before Ottawa understands that a $650 per person bill for Albertans is just too much through equalization? But it's not just Albertans that it's harming. Also, the residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. This is how absurd the program is that under equalization, they're considered a have province, but then you still have the federal government doing backdoor bailouts to that province. So we do think that equalization does need to be phased out over 20 years.
Thank you very much. Chair, I think I've only got about 15 seconds left, so I'll just cede my time.
That's about right. Okay, well, thank you. And now we're moving to the Liberals and Mr. McDonald for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. You can hear me okay? Yeah. Interesting enough, when we're talking about Alberta, 98% of the federal funding that went through COVID went to the Albertans. So I think there's a lot of businesses and individuals in Alberta that are certainly appreciative of what took place in the last 2 years relevant to COVID-19 and very thankful for it. My question is Council of Canadian Innovators, and I just wanted to ask Ms. O'Born that relative to venture capital, it has become very dominant force in financing of innovative companies, especially in the USA. And I'm wondering if she could elaborate a little bit on why there is such a low investment of venture capital in Canada?
Thank you so much for the question. So just to set the table, we are kind of arm's length from the venture capital community, although we do have a lot of interplay with them, and obviously they're helping startups grow and fueling a lot of the talent issues and other pieces that I mentioned earlier. Look, I think everybody wants to get involved in the tech game, right? Like the transition that we have seen happen in the last 2 years during the pandemic, even us just sitting here on a Zoom call, is I think something that we never envisioned happening for a parliamentary committee. And that means that there's all these new ideas and new innovations brought to the table. And people are interested in playing a part in that. There have been some, I think from the government perspective, there have been some interesting attempts to get involved in some of that venture capital activity, Vicky and Vicky 2. The BDC has also been quite active in the tech space. But I think what you're going to see is a lot of the venture capital investment coming up from the US still being a major factor and playing in Canada's tech ecosystem. However, I would be remiss without mentioning that our vice chair is also leading one of the largest VC funds in Canada, and so he might argue otherwise. So the trend is starting to shift, which means that there is more capital available to companies that are getting a leg up in Canada. So I think it's just something to monitor, and it's very interesting. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. It's something that you always hear about small startups, and I work closely with the DMZ out of Toronto, and it was always very interesting to hear. But sometimes when the companies get to a certain level, then they're gone, and you know why they're gone. They're in New York City with a venture capital fund, and it's tough to see small Canadian companies, and then they grow and expand. But maybe they'll be like Shopify and come back. But CCI also responded to the fall economic statement, and while expressing understanding for government's focus on the pandemic, you mentioned steps to improve Canada's footing in the digital economy, specifically open banking and modernizing privacy regulations, et cetera. And can you just expand on, what that would look like for the average Canadian small company, small business?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. I think, so on the fintech side, there's a fintech report that had been issued, and I know a number of, actually was mentioned earlier today. I think what we're seeing is just some fintech companies that are really growing quickly in Canada and wanting to offer different packages, products, and portfolios to customers. So, I mean, we all use banks, I hope, and we're all, transferring money and doing everything on our smartphones. So, how can we modernize and effectively, efficiently allow some of these new startups and this new innovation into the banking sector, which has been, pretty closed off for the last several decades. Mm-hmm. To your question about privacy, there was a privacy bill that was introduced under former Minister Navdeep Bains. And I think it came as a little bit of a surprise to the ecosystem in the sense that it was just not anticipated, not consulted on. And so I know that the government has taken that back and done some more thinking on it. But again, we're sitting here on Zoom. There was privacy protocols that we all had to endure as we set up for this conversation today. And we need to be thinking about that more broadly for Canadians. I mean, we all have a privilege to be on this call this evening, but there are a lot of Canadians who aren't aware of their privacy issues or what's at stake being online all the time. So I think for us, it's really important that government gets this right for citizens, but also for companies. Having several layers of regulation and compliance with Europe and the US is just going to be very difficult for companies to excel in Canada.
Thank you. How much time, Chair, or am I done?
You got about 15 seconds.
Just quickly, like our levels of employment got back to almost pre-pandemic levels. And I just want to know, how was it affected? How was the IT sector affected, or was it affected at all relative to COVID-19?
I think badly in the beginning, the government responded, but we've seen all kinds of employment growth. I think in Alberta right now, for instance, it's at a zero unemployment rate in the tech sector, same as in Ontario and Quebec. So the space is booming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. We are moving to the third round, members. We have the Conservatives up first, and Mr. Chambers for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. It's nice to see so many people. Of course, with so many of you, we don't have time to get to everybody. I'd like to spend a few minutes with the CD Howe, Mr. Cronick, You talked about inflation. I'm wondering if you could comment on, we've seen inflation continuing to increase. Bank of Canada holds interest rates. Some expectations inflation continues to persist into the year. And the Bank of Canada says we've absorbed all the slack in the system. What challenges are there and upward pressures on inflation with a government that's still going to spend money coming up in the next budget?
Well, I mean, that is the problem. When slack's been fully absorbed in an economy, if you're adding additional pressures on it, you are going to get upward pressures on inflation. And the Bank of Canada, the governor was clear, despite not increasing interest rates last week, that interest rate hikes are coming. And so the more pressure you put on inflation, obviously, the more you're going to have to hike rates to get inflation back to target. And as my colleague Mark Zellmer mentioned, Canada's debt load's not just in government. There's a lot of focus here in this panel, obviously, on government debt, but private debt, household and business debt is also incredibly high in Canada. And so any upward pressures on interest rates that feed through from the bank increasing the overnight rate, that's going to put strain on Canadian households and Canadian businesses.
Thank you. You might even say we're very addicted to debt in this country, private, public sector, households. Ms. Zurwitz, my colleague, correctly or quite rightly pointed to competition. It's nice to see others thinking the same way within the banking sector. But the truth is, competition across more than the banking sector, telcos, other federally regulated industries, including airlines and financial services, can actually help keep inflation low by increasing competition. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two parts of it, right? Increased competition and increased productivity, right? I mean, in both senses, what you're trying to do, in the case of competition, is you're forcing, the incumbents to offer lower prices. But in the case of productivity, you're improving your ability to produce things more efficiently, and therefore you can charge lower prices. And obviously, in a world where we do have this much debt, anything where we can keep inflation in check, lower prices, prevents us from having to increase interest rates to tame it.
Thank you. And it also has the benefit of being a very low cost measure that the government can implement. I'd like to turn to your colleague, Mr. Zellmer. Mr. Zellmer, you've written a little bit about MMT. You spoke about it at the beginning. I posed this question to other economists on the panel. What would have happened to interest rates had the Bank of Canada not purchased government debt?
Well, I think given that at the time, the credit markets and financial markets generally were seizing up, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, getting out there and expanding the balance sheet, along with a lot of other central banks around the world, helped to keep financial markets functioning. And so in the acute phase, if you like, of the pandemic, where there was a great deal of uncertainty, that is a fairly reasonable and rational response. It worked in the financial crisis back 2008, 2009. And it certainly helped to unlock the financial markets when the pandemic first set in. The question going forward is really one of, okay, we're through the worst of it. There is more certainty as to how the world is unfolding. And so the question is, how do you taper down and return the balance sheet to a more normal level? And so I think going forward, as they're dealing with the inflation pressures, yes, there will be interest rate hikes to come, as the governor has highlighted. But the other key of the equation is at what pace will they return some of those securities back into the marketplace, and how can they do that in a way that doesn't unduly disrupt the marketplace?
Thank you. And perhaps with my last 10 seconds, I'd you come back to this in a future round, but every economics student, the first thing they learn is there's no free lunch. And I think some of this MMT activity, we will be paying for it, and we're seeing it in higher inflation, but perhaps we can get to that in a future round. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chambers. We are moving to the Liberals and Mr. Baker for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. And it's great to see you, Ms. O'Born, again. I may not be able to direct my questions to you. If I can, if I have time remaining, I will. But I do want to begin with Mr. McDonald, if I could. And Mr. McDonald, I was very interested in your opening testimony, during which you spoke about the importance of national standards for long-term care. And I wonder if you could explain why national standards for long-term care are important in your view.
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a variety of care standards that exist at the provincial level, and starting to set some national standards, but not only national standards without money, but national standards with money from the federal government, so that it's quite clear what the federal government expects the provinces to obtain in terms of hours of care per recipient, for instance, or per client. And so this is the thing I think that we need to go into more detail on. I mean, certainly there's a staffing problem, which is that PSWs, particularly within long-term care, are poorly paid. There aren't enough of them. Something like the essential worker wage top-up that happened in the depths of the pandemic sets potentially a precedent to continue to increase wages, particularly at the low end. But this isn't purely about staffing. We also need to provide some sort of standards that all of the provinces attain, such that it doesn't matter whether you're in Ontario, whether you're in Prince Edward Island, you get the same level of care, or whether you move from Ontario to Prince Edward Island, you would still receive the same level of care because such benefits would be transportable between provinces.
Sure. And presumably setting standards, there's the point you're talking about moving between provinces, but even within each individual province, presumably by setting that standard, we would be disciplining ourselves to ensuring that seniors receive the quality of care that we believe that they deserve. Am I right about that?
Yes, quite right. And so this will certainly involve staffing. It might also involve capital. So this may have to do with large build-outs of long-term care, such that we don't have 4 people in a room. We have 1 or 2 people in a room. Even if you don't have the means to pay for a private room, because you have lived in Canada and contributed to this country, we believe that you deserve a certain level of dignity and, if you're in a long-term care home.
Sure. One of the other things you spoke about in your opening testimony, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please clarify if I'm not getting this right, but what I heard you say is that you recommended that the federal government provide funding to help realize the delivery against those national standards for long-term care, but you suggested that funding be tied to results or outcomes. Am I right about that? And if so, why is that important?
Well, more so that the funding be tied to the national standards, so that we're evaluating whether the standards are being obtained. We're evaluating that on a regular basis, and the funding is commensurate with that. I mean, this would be in negotiation with the provinces. Obviously, you'd expect the provinces to also bring money to the table, but the federal government is here, I think, in a position and has shown itself. The massive fiscal strength of the federal government can do great things in a time of crisis. And I think that this is one of the lessons learned from COVID-19. So hopefully the federal government will take that up in the next budget and preceding budgets to really ensure that this system is not overrun in future waves of this pandemic or in other emergencies.
And why, when you talk about tying the federal funding to national standards, what does that look like? What does that mean? Why not just provide funding to the provinces for them to allocate?
Well, I think it's important that the federal government know what it's buying, in essence. The federal government's coming to the table with a certain amount of money and that it's buying something. It's working with the provinces on something that's measurable. So there's a new investment being made, but there's something that comes from that investment. Unfortunately, as everybody knows who works with budget, money is fungible, and money can come in one way and then leave a different way unless there are, some sort of standards that you're attempting to attain through new investments in particular areas. Long-term care, just like other areas of healthcare, it's often far too easy to put money in and then have money taken out someplace else, such that you don't actually see an improvement for the people who you want to see that improvement for, which is people living in long-term care.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is what you're advocating for is for federal funding to support those national standards for long-term care. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure, pardon me, that funding actually goes towards, as much as possible, goes towards delivering against those standards that we believe need to be set to get seniors the quality of care that they deserve.
That's right.
Okay. I know my time is limited, so thank you very much, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Baker. We are moving to the bloc, Monsieur Saint-Marie, for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, j'aimerais.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the committee that the problem in the health system is underfunding by the federal government for several decades now. I can guarantee that the governments of Quebec and the provinces need more. Federal government has to do its share. They don't need more standards. When there are federal standards, what do we see? We see money voted for, and then it takes years before that money lands in the field. So it ends up being duplication and flag waving. So we in the Bloc thinks that there should be an increase in federal funding for healthcare rather than have new standards, because we trust the National Assembly of Quebec to make sure that the money goes to the right places. Now, having said that, Mr. Viau, in your document that you presented before the committee, you talked about the circular economy. Could you explain what that is and why we need a strategy for this? Thank you. Yes, of course. The circular economy, well, the basic principle is take what exists and transform it again.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Point of order.
Point of order, yes.
Are you going through the order correctly here?
I had Mr. Chambers, Mr. Baker, and then Monsieur Sainte-Marie, and then I've got next, I believe, is Mr. Blakey will be up next.
Okay, I thought
that's the order I've got.
Well, we got the second so perhaps I missed something here. Maybe we got the doubles going earlier, but I thought we had.
Clerk, I think I'll look to the clerk, but I believe the order has been correct.
The order correct?
Clerk.
Okay, my apologies.
Yep. Okay. I did stop the time. Monsieur Sainte-Marie, please continue.
Please go ahead, Mr. Viau. So the idea is to take fewer new resources and to recycle the resources into the economy to make sure that we can have more sustainable development. There's one sector that has a great deal of potential in this context. In the Netherlands, for example, and I would invite the members of the committee to familiarize themselves with this situation. In 2050, the aim there is to have a totally circular economy. So they are on the leading edge in that way. We need to have indicators, of course, in the different industrial sectors when we're trying to measure the circularity of the economy, and we need to progress toward those targets. And when it comes to supply as well, we can have a circular approach. We can have criteria for buying local. And certainly we can apply the same principles in various areas in order to help companies to repair or to improve. And we can use that for other strategies as well.
We are moving to the NDP and Mr. Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. McDonald, one of the glaring inequities in the government's response to the pandemic has been the vigor with which they've pursued Canadians below the poverty line to repay CERB benefits, and the complete lack of any even attempt to recover money from large publicly traded companies who benefited from the wage subsidy while increasing dividend payments to shareholders. I'm just wondering if you can speak to how much the government could reasonably expect to get back from Canadians who are living below the poverty line versus the amount that they might reasonably expect to get back from some of those large companies that are making big profits.
Thanks so much for the question. Certainly when it comes to CERB payment, I mean, this was an unfortunate feature that at the start of the pandemic, Canadians were encouraged to apply for the CERB and receive the CERB if they needed it. And many of them have been pursued as a result of this, which is unfortunate. I mean, a part of this was that there was a question as to whether they met the income threshold, which is to say whether they made $5,000 in the preceding 12 months or preceding year. And if you're not making $5,000 in the preceding 12 months or 12 months or 1 year, you're pretty low income. And so if you're making $3,000 instead of $5,000, or there was some form of wage theft that happened that you were paid that amount, but it wasn't correctly recorded on a T4 because you were working in sort of insecure employment. I mean, to my mind, it's unfortunate that CERB recipients have really borne the brunt of trying to, after the fact, go back and change the rules in essence of this program. That it seems to be that is the way that this is unfolded. It didn't have to be that way. I mean, that's the way it unfolded. That's unfortunate. I mean, on the other side, when it comes to the CEWS program, for instance, and this is very predictable, the recent report that I did that looked at the top paid CEOs in the country, a third of them headed companies that receive the wage subsidy. So here you've got, some of the best paid people in the country receiving massive bonuses at the same time as they're receiving federal support. Many of these companies were paying out dividends to shareholders, were declaring profitability over this period. That is an unfortunate feature of that program too. It was pretty predictable. We could have put constraints in place at the outset. None of this is illegal per se. It's just the program wasn't designed in such a way that you could catch this early on. Other countries did. I mean, other countries restricted their wage subsidy programs to medium and small companies, or they restricted to companies that weren't paying out dividends to shareholders and weren't paying extraordinary bonuses to CEOs. We didn't do that. And so I'm not sure how much that money could be recovered after the fact. Clearly, there's an attempt to recover it from CERB recipients, but there's really no attempt to recover it from large businesses.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Now it is your turn, Mr. McLean, and you are up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies for that. I also want to apologize to the witnesses here. You heard a statement earlier from my honorable colleague from Malpac, who said that 98% of benefits during COVID went to the province of Alberta, if we heard that correctly. I wanted to assure you there is some numeracy involved in the House of Commons Finance Committee, and we got checked him. We want to make sure that's part of the record. I'm certain he will appreciate the correction that we're putting on the record here. I will move to maintenant. Je vais demander des questions.
Now I would like to address a question to Marc-André Viau. I'm sorry, but I have to ask my question in English because I need to be very specific in my question, if you don't mind.
A lot about CCUS, carbon capture utilization and storage, and yet every world body says that carbon capture utilization and storage will be essential to meeting our actual decarbonization goals going out to 2050. If every other body in the world is saying this is essential and you're saying we shouldn't participate in it, who do you suppose is wrong?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your introductory words in French. I'm not saying that the industry can't develop this technology, but what I am saying is that the Government of Canada should not be subsidizing these measures. As I said, the technologies do not deliver the goods. They don't meet the objectives. A great deal of energy and resources, financial and otherwise, are being spent on limiting emissions that are associated with fossil fuel extraction. But if we really want to reduce emissions, that's not the way to go. It's really by reducing the emissions from the whole sector. We shouldn't go with something that might work but doesn't actually work.
I appreciate what you're saying there, and it is expensive. It has been expensive to this point in time, and as the technology has advanced, it is coming down in price. We've made a significant investment in this technology sector in Canada through public money, both provincial and federal. We were once the world leader in this technology for good reasons. We've lost that lead now to the U.S. The U.S. is the leader. They're going to continue to advance this technology. The latest technology has it bringing down potentially to $50 per ton to store carbon underground. That is world-changing. As we say, as we develop these technologies, they become more efficient. As we're losing this to the United States because of bad government policy that hasn't kept up, we're going to lose this technology, we're going to lose this industry, we're going to lose this environmental benefit. Everything I've heard you talk about here, like green hydrogen, is much further down the development curve. Can you tell me how long you think it'll take for green hydrogen to actually start delivering some environmental benefits? 1 decade, 2 decades? But no matter what, I'm going to propose to you that it's significantly longer than getting environmental benefits from carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Please.
Well, I'm not saying that green hydrogen is the magic solution. We think that green hydrogen is one aspect, one possibility among others, even where hydrogen is concerned. So we shouldn't count on that solution to really reduce our GHG emissions a great deal. We need to really concentrate on certain areas like marine transportation and others where it's really more difficult to reduce emissions. And then looking further down the road, then maybe carbon capture could be used, but the benefits have not been demonstrated. I certainly want to allow for all possibilities, but we shouldn't be spending taxpayer money on that option when there's no proven success.
We're moving to the Liberals now. Madame Châtel for 5 minutes.
Yeah, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Monsieur Harvey. But before I turn, just want to correct something. I'm sure Madame Auborn didn't say that we will need to introduce a patent box in our tax system because just as a reminder for everyone that it's an OECD and Canada commitment to not having patent box in tax system of the country globally. It's a minimum standard of the base erosion, base erosion and profit shifting. So just want to highlight this.
May I respond very quickly? Just so that you...
No, just maybe if I have time, I'll go back to you. But I just want to flag that it's Canada's minimum standard. On the question, Monsieur Harvey, tout à l'heure vous avez...
You said earlier, Mr. Harvey, that the network has a significant impact in rural and semi-rural areas, and this is important. We talked with Ms. Auborn about innovation. I know right now the CFDCs and the network can fund projects, but really we're talking about smaller projects. And when it comes to innovation, we have strategic investments that can amount to $20 or $30 million or more. So is there a gap between what is being done at the local level and then these larger programs so that we may be missing something in the middle there? Thank you for that question. there is a great gap because with the resources that we have right now, we can work with local businesses that have $2 million in business or less. And all we can do is kind of initiate them into a culture of innovation. And of course, we can't fund projects that would really help them nurture and scale up those innovations. We may need to have a way of working together to promote that culture better. And we realized when we tried to do that a few years ago that we had the problem of imposter kind of syndrome because we really needed specialists, consultants, academics that would help us to really work with these companies. And we could tell them about innovation, encourage them in that direction, but we didn't have the real expertise. Major companies have access to the resources and the expertise that they need. So as a network, what we could do if the federal government through its agencies provided us the resources we needed, we could really help our clients with innovation. Thank you. You talked about this innovation committee that you had. There are super committees, I think 5 of them in larger regions. There's this partnership between universities and entrepreneurs and things. Given this type of approach, could we do that at a more local level in more rural areas? Yes, of course. We could certainly do this in an innovation cluster sort of approach. We need to build bridges. Maybe the goal would be to create smaller clusters in the more rural areas and semi-urban as well. But the important thing would be to create access to that because we know that particular economic sectors would be focused on depending on the region. And we would need to be able to enable more companies to get involved.
And that's the time, Madame Chatel, and looking at time, members, and just, so many questions. And I know we have many, but we're getting close to the end. So we just have enough time to allow for each party to have one quick question and one quick answer. So we'll start with Mr. Chambers, the Conservatives.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, you mentioned about our spending review at government. It's been 10 years since the federal government has done any widespread review of its spending. That's a really long time for a government to have increasing spending to its degree that it's have and not actually focus on where they're getting value for money. Do you want to comment any more on that?
I think it's very important. We have to remember that even before the pandemic, 2018-19, the federal government was spending all-time highs, and that's accounting for inflation and population growth. And look, there's a ton of wasteful spending that we're seeing. I mean, we saw the federal government blow $8,800 on a sex toy show in Germany. Hundreds of millions of dollars for the Ford Motor Company. So I think those examples make it very clear that we need our federal politicians on the Hill to start taking the spending problem seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. And now moving to Liberals, Ms. Zarowitz, for a quick question and answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My last question is actually to Mr. Kronik and Mr. Zellner. Just your top recommendation for budget 2022. We'll start with you, Mr. Kronik, then to you, Mr. Zellmer.
Okay, so my top recommendation, I think, for budget 22 is around the the bank tax. I think that the bank tax at that moment, at this moment in time, should be avoided. I don't think it'll be helpful for growth. And at this point, what we're looking for is as much productive growth as we can.
Mr. Zellner?
Thank you. My top recommendation would be to make sure that Canada's public debt to GDP ratio for all levels of government stays towards the better part of a pact of the G7 countries, so that we have the room to cope with the fact that the private sector is at record levels of indebtedness globally and over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zurowitz. And now moving to the block, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Viau. Should Parliament adopt a green economy budget so that we make sure that we put the emphasis on less pollution? Well, certainly. I certainly agree with that proposal. We heard such promises in the last election campaign, and it would be good to work with parliamentarians on that. We need to have a green transition. We talked about the mandate of the finance minister for transparency and investment objectives, and we certainly need to include GHG emissions in that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're on mute.
Yeah. I apologize. Yeah, I'm moving to you, Mr. Blakey. Yeah, you're up for a quick question and answer.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. We've heard a lot today about concern for Canada's public finances and recommendations to control spending, but we haven't heard a lot of talk on the revenue side. And we're in a position where, now 1% of Canada's population controls 25% of the wealth, which hasn't been the case for a very long time. I'm wondering if you can speak to the revenue side of the equation when we talk about balancing out the government's books.
Yeah, of course, there's always a focus on attempting to cut back government spending. Often that will kick the problem to some other part of the Canadian economy, whether that's the provinces or households who then have to deal with that debt because healthcare costs are rising or something like that. But certainly the other side that I think is underappreciated, as you point out, is the expenditure side. A wealth tax could raise in the $10 to $20 billion a year. Increased tax on the corporate sector, for instance, could raise the $7 to $8 billion a year. I mean, corporate income tax promise was big increases in capital investment, which never appeared, unfortunately. And so I think it's time to turn back the way the Americans and those in the UK are towards higher corporate taxes, as well as closing corporate tax loopholes, particularly for large corporations. These are ways that we can also reduce the deficit without harming people that rely on government services like healthcare and childcare and so on.
That is our time. Thank you, Mr. Blakey. And to the witnesses, just on behalf of the members, the clerk, the staff, the interpreters, everybody that makes the magic happen here, we want to thank you for your testimony, for your answers to the many questions as you inform our pre-budget consultation and report. Thank you so much. And look to the members. We'll adjourn this meeting at this time. See everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.